Hi, folks. Welcome to this recorded lecture of What's So Special About Literature, which is Chapter 1 in our Growing Up with Literature textbook for our children's literature class. In this PowerPoint, you will see some things about why literature is so valuable for working with young children and using it every day with them, some kinds of approaches to how we can go about using literature with young children, and some strategies, little techniques for specific kinds of ways to incorporate into the classroom books and literature activities. So I'd like to start off with a question for each of you, basically asking what kind of reading or literature experiences did you have as a young child? It's really important to kind of give this some thought because some of you may say that you had positive experiences where reading was a part of your everyday life, whether it was in a preschool setting or at home where you were read to, or you had access to books that you could flip through and look at pictures and look at words. And others of you may say that you have had some negative experiences with literature in that you did not have the option to look at books or have someone read books to you. So you need to think about those kinds of experiences as a way to kind of shape how you will work with young children and using literature with them. On our second slide, I have an important question. Why is it so valuable for children? We need to incorporate literature often because we need to find a balance. As we all know, in today's world, technology is a big piece of everything in our lives, and for young children, often they are using technology a great deal as well. So we have to make sure that literature is somehow incorporated into their daily life to kind of balance out the different types of technology that they're also using. So it has to kind of be just as important to them as some of their technology devices that they're utilizing. So a couple of bullet points to remember here is, why is it valuable? Well, it can help children to learn about their world. They already know some things just from experience, and if we bring books in that relate to those experiences, it kind of gives them a little more information. It kind of piques their interest a little bit more. So if they, for example, know about a visit to the zoo that they had and they learned about animals and they saw them firsthand, then you can choose some books that have to do with animals that they might have seen at the zoo that could expand their knowledge. The second point is to remember that literature can help children to develop positive attitudes about many of the things in their life. It can help them to form positive self-image of themselves. They can also develop tolerance for others. And literature can also help them to set their own goals for what they, how they want to behave and how they want to act. And it can also increase their wonder and curiosity, which are very natural things for young children anyway. Curiosity is a huge piece of early childhood development. It's kind of a natural thing. So as early childhood educators, we need to use books that kind of just keep that curiosity going. A third bullet point to remember here is that children's literature is so important because it helps them connect to the person reading the book to them, as well as to other people, maybe characters in the book, and to help them develop relationships based on how they see characters in a book developing relationships. It kind of gives them a guide or a roadmap, really, in how they go about doing this. So there's lots of good reasons there why literature is so valuable. The next slide talks about what is called a holistic approach. Holistic, coming from the word whole, meaning lots of parts and pieces that go into something, making it a holistic approach. And the reason why we need to use very different parts and pieces when working with literature and young children is that children develop in different ways at different ages. So there's really not one way that we can present something to children, because they're all at different stages of development and they all learn in different ways. So we have to use a variety of ways and approaches with literature in order to reach every single child that's in our classrooms. There's no single road to literacy, which means there's not just one right way to use books, to learn from books. To have books in our early childhood classrooms. There's lots of different ways that we can get children to learn to read, to learn to write, to learn to use all these kinds of literacy skills together. A third bullet point to remember for using a holistic approach is that many people are involved in interacting, relating to, and supporting literacy. So again, not just the one early childhood teacher in the classroom reading to children every day, the same old thing. Nope. We have to utilize many people, assistants, aides, parents at home. There could be videos of others reading books in different tones and voices, going on field trips where others tell stories or read books to children. There's a whole host of people that are involved in literacy development, and that's all part of the holistic approach. And the last bullet point is to remember that language, reading, and writing are all different ways or tools that help children to kind of figure out their world, to make sense of what's going on in their life, to think about things, to learn some, thinking skills, how to analyze, all that kind of thing is important when we're using all kinds of literacy skills such as language, reading, and writing. Our next slide talks about the characteristics of a holistic approach. We need to use whole texts. That means not just, let's say, a sentence from a book, but large enough chunks of that book to get a storyline across, to understand how a character develops or how a character is speaking or working a problem out. It can't just be single lines that we use where we're just focused on a word or a phrase. We have to kind of use bigger chunks. In addition, we have to use the books in order to help children develop all of these skills, the language skills, writing, reading, speaking, listening skills. Those are all the concepts of language, and books can do that. They can touch upon all those areas. We also have to remember that holistic approach means it's child-centered as well. There has to be interaction of the children with the book. That means not just having someone read to them all the time, but having the child be able to be a part of the story, maybe say certain lines in the book, have props that they could use for certain parts of the story. There's tons of different ways to have them be interactive with the story and not have it be a passive reading experience, rather an active reading experience. In addition, there's lots of cooperative activities that can be completed for each and every book that you use with children. Instead of just reading it and then moving on to something else unrelated, you would always want to relate your activity back to any reading of a book that you might have done that particular morning. In addition, another characteristic is to have parents involved. This is where you can send home an activity or some sort of reading log that children can do with their parents or caregivers at home. It keeps them involved to see what's going on in their child's life, what their child is reading, what their child is interested in. And it can also have that homeschool connection for children who are in early childhood programs. The next slide talks about strategies to support development of literacy. Just a couple of little things to remember and use in the classroom. LEA is called the language experience approach. And this is a shared common experience followed by a group created story or list. Basically what that means is a teacher may choose to discuss with the children in the morning, maybe at a circle time, for example, a topic they're interested in or a place that they might have been, such as the zoo or a museum that they might have been to. And then as a group, the children would create a story with the teacher by writing sentences. For example, the teacher would maybe write the first sentence on the whiteboard or on a piece of white chart paper, and then one student would provide orally another sentence that the teacher would write on the board underneath her initial sentence. And then the next student would provide the next sentence. And so the story hopefully would flow in some sort of logical progression, but then the fun part comes in is when we read it at the end, and there's parts of the story that may actually be funny because a child added in a funny piece that may not have been directly related, but it almost becomes one of those Mad Lib kind of stories. But that is a great kind of shared common experience because everyone had a part in creating that story. Another piece of something you can use in a classroom is called the shared reading experience, and this is what uses what we call a big book. It is a book that is of a large size. Unlike the normal books that children read, the normal size books, this is a larger one that gets put on an easel. Children can see the pictures, and the words often are a lot larger. They could see them from a distance, and these big books tend to be in a kit form where they also have different props to go with it so the students can be involved, as we talked about with the interaction of the book. And it's an interesting kind of way to share a reading experience in the classroom. There's many of these. I have a whole bunch of them for our classroom use when we do get to class next week. And these big books have the props that I was talking about. So they should be interesting to see. So far we've talked about all the different ways that we can incorporate literature and why it's so valuable. And then if we were in class today, I would have had you complete a class activity with a partner or a group where you would have been given a choice of a couple of children's literature, good quality children's literature books that I was bringing in. And I was going to ask you to complete the following. Talk about ways each book helps the children learn about their world, what kinds of things in that book are experiences that children may have had that we can expand on their knowledge. How could these books build their self-esteem, their tolerance, increase their curiosity for learning more about the topic that was in the book? And then I would also have asked you to give an example of at least one activity per each book that I provided to you that kind of enhances what children can learn from it. Could they make a puppet out of a character in the story? Could they have created some sort of picture based on what they envisioned the story, where it was taking place, if there was not a lot of illustrations in the book, a variety of things you could have come up with. It was very open-ended, very creative on your part. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to it in class because we didn't have class today, but that is one of those things that I would have done with you. So please review again this particular chapter by reading the chapter, and then you can go to the discussion board on Blackboard and answer the discussion board question for chapter 1, where I will give you a little feedback as to what approach I want you to take when I post the announcement for this. Okay, great. See you next week, everyone.